Hello everyone. Welcome to Indian Economy by Aman Soni. In today's news hour, we shall be discussing the important articles related to economy from the Hindu newspaper. In page 1 and editorial page, there is no news related to economy. In the open editorial page, this article discusses about the need for the government to be once again the job creator. Let's go into the details of the article. The author says that creation of employment is a very big problem in any economy, especially in the Indian economy when we have such a huge problem of population and unemployed and low skilled labor force. And the private sector, which is supposed to create many jobs, is not creating as many jobs that is required to absorb the additional labor force in the market. And even though the IT sector and the gig economy sector, they have created some jobs, they have either created very high skilled jobs or very low skilled jobs. For example, the IT sector absorbs all the skilled, high skilled engineers, and the gig economy. Gig economy is where the people work on contract to contract basis of jobs. For example, a freelancer working on some project, a graphic designer working as a freelancer, or a Swiggy or Zomato delivery boy. All these are examples for gig economy. So these are all low skilled jobs. So the author says that the private sector either creates very high skilled jobs or very low skilled jobs, but the number of jobs that are created are not enough to absorb all the additional labor force. And adding to all of this, our economy is currently facing the problem of increasing inflation, unemployment, and underemployment. Underemployment is a situation where a person of very high skilled is working in a job which requires lower skills. For example, a person with a PhD working as a P1 in a company. So a person who has done PhD, he is working as at a low skilled job which requires just a qualification of say high school or 10th standard. That is why it is called as underemployment. And what are the employment trends in India? Media reports show that the government is coming up with a huge vacancies of jobs, and the 10 lakh jobs that the government has promised to create, almost 85% of that would be enough to cover the existing vacancies in the central government. So that means that the government is as such not creating any new jobs. It is just trying to fill up the existing vacancies in the central government departments. And the jobs in the public sector units are slowly reducing. We know the current government is going more towards the disinvestment of public sector undertakings, and as the Prime Minister said, the government has no business in business. So that is why the most of the non-performing PSUs have been disinvested or they have been put for strategic sale and privatized, because of which the direct public sector employment that the government used to provide earlier, that has been reducing. So even in the PSUs, the jobs are declining. And on one hand, when the labor force and the worker force participation rates are increasing, there is decline in the quality of the jobs. For example, there is an increase in the unpaid segment of self-employed jobs. For example, in an agricultural field, when the family members are working in the field, it is kind of unpaid work because you are self-employed in your job and it is unpaid. And the share of agricultural sector in the total employment is increasing. We know agriculture increase in jobs in the agricultural sector will lead to disguised unemployment, because in a plot of land which requires say 2 workers, now currently there will be 4 workers working, so the marginal productivity of the labor is low. Where we need just 2 workers to finish the job, now we are having 4 workers to finish the same job, so the productivity of labor is reducing, and a huge mass of labor will lead to reduce in the productivity as we just discussed. And the share of manufacturing sector in the national income, even that has reduced compared to the previous years. In 2018-2019, the share of manufacturing sector in the national income was almost 12%, but after the pandemic, because of the lockdown, fall in the manufacturing levels, the share has reduced to 10.9%. And even though the aggregate unemployment levels have slightly reduced, if we look at the current daily status unemployment figure, which is internationally used for statistics, there are still many people who are unemployment, and the educated unemployment rate is increasing, and the unemployment rate among the youth, especially for the people between 15 to 29 years, especially in the urban areas, even though it has marginally fallen, there is, because of the population of our country, there is huge unemployment even in this segment. And the employment in the informal sector has risen. For example, for the men it has risen from 71 percentage to 75 percentage, and for the women it has risen from 55 percentage to 57 percentage. So the rise in employment in the informal sector means that more people are going towards informal jobs which don't have statutory benefits or social security benefits. And what is the role of private sector? We know that the private sector is supposed to create jobs in the economy, but the private sector is not that good in creating the jobs. So the government at this juncture cannot avoid creating jobs, so it has to take up on the role of being the principal employment generator again. We cannot be sure of the gig economy jobs that are going to be created, because all the projections about the gig economy, they are given by agencies who might have vested interests. They want to drive the policies of the government, so the statistics of those agencies could be tampered with. We cannot rely on them. They are not the official government statistics. And the private sector creates jobs based on the market force of demand and supply, based on the skill sets and the changing technology. And at this juncture, we cannot completely rely on the private sector to create the jobs. That is where the role of the government comes in, and the government has to take upon itself the job of role of job creator. The authors gave an example where even though the private sector capital investment was very huge, the number of jobs that were created was very less. Here the author gives the example of Adani Group investment in Uttar Pradesh, where with an investment of almost 70,000 crores, the jobs created were just 30,000 jobs, that being the total of skilled and unskilled jobs. And even though the foreign direct investment is increasing, the FDI in India mostly goes into non-manufacturing sector. And manufacturing sector has the ability to create more jobs, especially for the lower skilled and low skilled people. But because the FDI is going towards non-manufacturing sector, again that many jobs are not being created. So what is the role of the government? The government should need to concentrate and enable the creation of decent workforce and a sustainable labor market. The government should re-establish its role as the principal employment generator through the creation of jobs under its ministries and public sector units, and especially in the rural areas for unskilled labor through the schemes like MG Narega. That's about this article. In the explainer page, there is an article about the impact of adopting cryptocurrency as the official currency for a country. El Salvador last year adopted Bitcoin as its official currency. Earlier, El Salvador used to deal with the US dollars. Now, because of the crash in the cryptocurrency prices, the ability of the country to pay back its government debt, that is directly being affected. Because think about it, a country has accumulated its currency in a Bitcoin. Now there is a sudden fall of prices of Bitcoin, so the value of the currency that the government is holding, that is being eroded. So now the government doesn't have the ability to pay back its debt, and it is going to go into the debt crisis. El Salvador government had invested almost more than 100 million US dollars worth in Bitcoin, and the value has eroded to less than half because of the crash in Bitcoins. Earlier it used to deal in the US official currency, but because of its growing public debt, the bonds that were issued by the El Salvador government, they were considered as junk bonds. What are junk bonds? When the bonds don't have the creditworthiness to be paid back to the investor, when the investor is not sure of getting the returns from those bonds. The credit rating agencies consider those type of bonds as junk bonds because they are of no use. Even if you invest in those kind of bonds, you are going to lose your investment. That is why they are called junk bonds. And currently the bonds issued by the El Salvador government, they are trading at a steep discount and are classified junk by investors. So the El Salvador government thought that if we encourage more people to use Bitcoin, we can raise debt through Bitcoin. But the idea went for a flop and now the country is going to face crisis. In the business page, there's an headline about how SEBI fining the RIL for delayed Facebook deal disclosure. So here for exam we need to read the functions of SEBI. India faces near-term challenges, says the Finance Ministry. Because of the global pandemic and the supply chain disruption in the ships, then the increase in the crude oil prices, that is directly affecting the Indian economy too, just like how it is affecting the all other countries. Now India is going to face near-term to medium-term challenges. The Finance Ministry is saying so. And what are the challenges? Especially the challenge regarding to the fiscal deficit. Because of the high dependence on oil and high imports and increase in imports more than the exports, we are going to have fiscal deficit. And because of fiscal deficit, the current account deficit also would be high because we will be borrowing more in the current year. And we also face the problem of sustaining the economic growth after recovering from the pandemic. And on the other side, we are also facing the inflation. But the finance ministry also says that India is in a relatively better position as compared to other developed countries or developing countries because of the stability in our financial sector and of the success of our vaccination policy. Because of the success of the vaccination policy, more labor force can directly go and work now as compared to other African countries where the vaccination has been not that efficient. And what are the challenges that we are going to face? We just discussed there is going to be high fiscal deficit, and fiscal deficit will directly lead to current account deficit because we will be borrowing more in the current fiscal year. And the compounding effect of both of this will have an impact on the value of the rupee. So the rupee would weaken. When the rupee weakens, it would be favorable for the exports and the imports would become costlier. So when we are importing more and the imports are costlier, we have to give out more rupees, but at the same time the value of rupees is falling, so we have to give even more rupees to purchase the same goods. So we can see how it is having a compounding effect. So what should we do in such a situation? We should rationalize the non-capital expenditure spending. We should not spend on those things which will not be productive for the economy. So the main thing that the government should focus on is the rationalization of non-capital expenditure spending, because any capital expenditure spending would have compounding positive effects on the economy, and any expenditure on non-capital expenditure would lead to more liquidity, more currency in the economy, that would lead to more inflation again. Already one side the inflation is too high. If the money supply increases, it would again lead to more inflation. So we need to control such a situation. And there is also risk of depreciation of rupee even more. And because the foreign portfolio outflows are increasing, we saw how the impact of US government's federal tapering would have a direct impact on the outflows of FPI, and because of which again it would have an impact on the value of currency, then again it would have an impact on the imports. So now because of the policies of US Federal Bank, where it is increasing the interest rate, now the foreign portfolio investors would find investing in USA more lucrative, so they would want to take out the money from India and go to USA. That is why there is FPI outflows. So this FPI outflows would have a direct impact on the foreign currency and the imports. And at the same time, because of the high global crude oil prices and the increase in edible oil prices, we are having imported inflation. The value of the goods that we are importing is already high because of the high crude oil prices and high oil prices. So that concept is called as imported inflation. And adding to that high increased imported inflation cost, because of the summer heat wave, the production of various vegetables and grains in the domestic market, it got affected, because of which it would directly have an impact and increase in the domestic inflation too. So here we can see that on the one side the domestic inflation is increasing, on the other side there is imported inflation, and there is going to be increase in fiscal deficit, there is going to be increase in current account deficit. All this would have an impact on the value of the rupee. The value of the rupee would depreciate, it would unfavorably and make the imports costlier. So this would all have cumulative effect again on the economy. That is why the government is saying that, the finance ministry is saying that India would face near term challenges because of all this negative aspects that has been happening all over the world and in the domestic economy. But on a positive side, the crude oil prices may come down slightly in the future because the global manufacturing growth weakens and the OPEC nations are trying to increase the supply of oil. We need not go through all these articles, these are not important for UPSC. That's about today's news hour. Thank you so much.